Sometimes, a single second on the water's edge can decide whether a life becomes a memory or a miracle. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next one. The late autumn sun hung low over the Hudson, staining the river in shades of molten gold and rust red. Manhattan's skyline shimmered in the distance, while a crisp wind carried the scent of salt water and fallen leaves along Hudson River Park's walking path. Naomi Carter's black sneakers scuffed softly against the weathered planks of the pier as she walked, hands deep in her jacket pockets. She had come here after her shift at a small Italian bistro in the Bronx, her safe place after long hours balancing trays and dodging impatient customers. This stretch of the park, with its benches and scattered joggers, was the one corner of the city where her thoughts could breathe. Naomi's eyes were on the water, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. On the rent bill waiting on her kitchen table, the upcoming shift she'd agreed to cover for a coworker, and the unopened envelope from the city college that had been sitting on her nightstand for weeks. It happened so fast, she almost didn't believe it at first. Two high-pitched shouts pierced the air, sharp and panicked. She turned instinctively. 50 feet away, two boys, maybe 9 years old, were leaning over the railing, one of them reaching for something in the water. The wind carried the sound of a metallic clink as a baseball cap slipped from small fingers into the river. "Elliot, don't!" the other boy yelled. But before the warning could land, Elliot's sneaker slipped on the damp wood. His arms flailed, and in one terrifying second, he was over the rail, plunging into the Hudson with a splash that swallowed the sound of his twins' scream. Naomi's body moved before her brain could catch up. She sprinted toward the railing, heart pounding, vision narrowing. The second boy, pale-faced, frozen, gripped the rail in shock. "Stay there!" she shouted, yanking off her jacket. The river's water was colder than she'd imagined, stealing her breath the moment she plunged in. Her arms cut through the choppy surface, eyes locked on the flailing figure ahead. Elliot's head bobbed once, twice, then disappeared under the surface. "No, no, no!" Naomi kicked harder, every muscle screaming against the icy current. Her fingers brushed fabric, the sleeve of his sweatshirt, and she seized it with a grip fueled by pure desperation. They broke the surface together, Elliot coughing and sputtering, eyes wide with fear. "Hold on to me," she gasped, adjusting her grip so she could keep his head above water. The current was pulling them sideways toward the pier's pilings. Naomi angled her body, fighting it, lungs burning. Shouts echoed from above. Someone was calling 911. A rope appeared over the railing, dangling just within reach. Naomi maneuvered Elliot close enough for him to grab it. Strong hands on the other end hauled him upward, his wet sneakers slipping against the rail before a man in a navy jacket hoisted him onto the pier. Naomi reached for the rope, but before she could grip it, another wave slapped against her, spinning her toward the pier's understructure. She collided with the slick wood, pain shooting through her shoulder. Then, another pair of hands reached down, catching her wrist. She looked up into the sharp, angular face of a man in a gray cashmere coat. The moment their eyes met, she knew gratitude would not be the first thing out of his mouth. "What the hell did you think you were doing?" His voice was low but laced with fury as he hauled her over the railing. The crowd around them parted as if making room for the confrontation. Naomi landed hard on the planks, dripping and shivering, her palms raw from gripping the rope. Before she could answer, the man stepped closer, towering over her. "Are you trying to kill my child? Are you insane?" His words cut sharper than the wind. Naomi blinked at him, disoriented. "I just pulled him out of the water." "You pushed him in," he snapped, his blue-gray eyes burning. "I saw you running toward them. Don't lie to me." The crowd murmured. Someone was filming on their phone. Naomi's lips parted, but before she could speak, a smaller voice cut through the tension. "Dad, stop!" It was the other boy, the twin who had stayed on the pier. His face was pale, hair plastered to his forehead from the spray. She didn't push him. She saved him. Elliot, now wrapped in a towel, added hoarsely, "If she hadn't jumped, I'd still be in the river." The man, Alexander Langford, though Naomi didn't know his name yet, froze for a fraction of a second, his jaw tightening. His gaze flickered from one son to the other, then back to Naomi. The set of his mouth didn't soften. "Get the boys to the car," he told someone behind him. A driver, judging by the black suit and earpiece. The twins obeyed, glancing back at Naomi with a mixture of guilt and awe. Alexander remained. "If anything had happened to them..." He didn't finish the sentence, as though the image alone was too much. Instead, he gave Naomi one last look, the kind that measured, judged, and filed away, before turning on his heel and walking toward the black SUV idling by the curb. The crowd began to disperse, their curiosity satisfied. A few people murmured, "Good job," as they passed Naomi, but the sting of Alexander's words outweighed any praise. She sat on the bench by the pier, water dripping from her jeans, the cold finally seeping into her bones. She wasn't sure what stung more, the river's bite or the fact that she had risked everything for a stranger's child, only to be accused in front of half the park. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Jasmine Lee, her friend from the bistro. "You okay? Saw a video online. You're trending." Naomi stared at the message, confused. Trending? She had no idea that somewhere on a dozen different phones, the scene that had just unfolded, from Elliot's fall to Alexander's accusation to the boys defending her, was already making its way across TikTok, Twitter, and beyond. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the planks. Naomi stood, wringing out her hair, and began the walk back to the subway. She didn't know it yet, but the next time she saw Alexander Langford, it would be in a place where the river couldn't reach them, but the current between them would be just as strong. By the time Naomi reached her small apartment in the Bronx, the November sky had already darkened to a deep, inky blue. Street lamps buzzed and flickered along the block, casting pale halos over cracked sidewalks. Her wet clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin as she climbed the narrow stairwell, keys jangling in her cold, stiff fingers. The first thing she noticed when she pushed open the door was the sound, a steady, insistent ping from her phone. She tossed her jacket over the back of the single chair by the kitchen table and pulled out the device. 23 new text messages. Half were from Jasmine. "Girl, you are all over TikTok. Even my cousin in Queens just sent me the link. You need to see this." The rest were from co-workers, old friends from high school, and numbers she didn't even recognize. Some were short and warm, "Proud of you, Naomi," while others were cautious. "You okay? People are talking." Naomi set the phone down, breathing deeply. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, staring at the dark square of the window. She'd saved a child today. 2, if she counted the other boy's panic subsiding. But instead of feeling heroic, she felt like she was standing in the middle of a storm she hadn't seen coming. Her phone vibrated again, this time with an incoming call. Jasmine. Naomi answered on the second ring. "Hey. You're not watching?" Jasmine's voice was a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Watching what?" "Hold on, I'm sending it." A pause, a soft whoosh as the video came through. "Check your messages. It's the Hudson thing." But from about 5 different angles. Naomi hesitated, thumb hovering over the play icon. Then she pressed it. The video opened with the river in the background, the camera jostling as the person filming gasped. Elliot's fall was sudden and brutal, his small body disappearing into the churning water. The footage showed Naomi sprinting down the pier, stripping off her jacket mid-run and leaping without hesitation. The lens followed her struggle in the current, her arm locking around Elliot's torso as she fought toward the rope. The cheers when he was pulled up were short-lived. The camera caught Alexander Langford's arrival in crisp, damning clarity. "Are you trying to kill my child?" His voice on the recording was icy and unmistakable. The comments section below the clip was already a battlefield, half defending Naomi, half defending him. Naomi pressed her lips together. "Well, that's out there now." "That's everywhere now," Jasmine corrected. Twitter's on fire. The hashtag #HudsonHero is trending, but so is #LangfordLies. You know who he is, right? Naomi frowned. "Besides a guy with a very expensive coat?" "He's Alexander Langford," Jasmine said, as though the name explained everything. "Langford Capital, Wall Street Shark. Every news channel knows his face." Naomi ran a hand over her damp hair. "Great. So I'm in a viral video with one of the richest men in New York." "You're not just in it. You're the good guy. Well, to half the internet anyway." Jasmine's voice softened. "You okay? You look shaken." Naomi thought of Elliot's small, cold hands clutching at her in the water, of the raw gratitude in his eyes, and then of the way Alexander's gaze had burned right through her, heavy with accusation. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired." After they hung up, Naomi changed into dry clothes and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the videos again. Some were short TikTok edits set to triumphant music. Others were slowed down, captioned, and shared with armchair analysis about class conflict and the culture of blame. One post had over 2 million views already. Then she saw the first piece from a news outlet, a clip from Channel 4 in Wall. Anchor. "Tonight, a dramatic rescue at Hudson River Park has gone viral. Witnesses say Naomi Carter, a waitress from the Bronx, jumped into the river to save a 9-year-old boy from drowning. The boy's father, prominent financier Alexander Langford, initially accused her of causing the accident, a claim both his sons contradicted on the scene." A headshot of Alexander appeared on screen, beside a still of Naomi pulling Elliot toward the rope. The contrast between his polished boardroom portrait and her soaked, breathless frame was striking. Naomi muted the video. She didn't need to hear the debate that would follow. She could already imagine the split-screen interviews, the hot takes from talking heads who'd never been within 10 feet of the Hudson's icy current. She tried to sleep that night, but the glow from her phone kept pulling her back. By midnight, her Instagram DMs were full. From strangers, from reporters, from brands offering to collaborate. A local journalist even asked for a quote about your feelings toward Mr. Langford. By morning, Naomi's world had shifted. Alexander Langford hated mornings like this. His phone buzzed constantly on the marble countertop of his Tribeca apartment as he buttered a piece of toast. He had no appetite. The twins were at the breakfast table, their chatter unusually subdued. Elliot stared into his cereal bowl. Evan traced patterns in the condensation on his juice glass. Across from them, Alexander's sister-in-law, Claire, folded her arms. "It's all over the news, Alex. You need to address it before it turns into something bigger." "It already is something bigger," he muttered, swiping through a barrage of emails. Headlines screamed, "Wall Street CEO accuses rescuer, Hudson Park hero versus high finance, Langford under fire for viral confrontation." Claire leaned forward. "You were wrong. Just say it. Publicly. It'll be over faster." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I was protecting my sons." "You were wrong," she repeated, softer this time. She glanced at the boys. "And they know it." Elliot shifted in his seat, glancing at Evan. Then he looked at his father. "She saved me, Dad." Alexander met his son's eyes for a brief, silent moment before looking away. By midday, the decision had been made for him. His PR director, Martin Hayes, called from the Langford Capital offices. If you don't make a statement today, the narrative will solidify without you, Martin said. And right now, it's not in your favor. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. Draft something. I'll look at it. That afternoon, Naomi was wiping down a table at the bistro when her manager poked his head out of the office. Naomi, TV, Channel 7. She looked up at the screen mounted above the bar. There was Alexander standing before a row of microphones outside Langford Capital's glass-fronted headquarters. Reporters crowded close, their questions overlapping. I want to address the incident at Hudson River Park, Alexander began, voice calm but clipped. In the moment, I reacted out of fear for my children. I made an accusation that was unfounded. Ms. Naomi Carter's actions were brave, selfless, and deserving of gratitude. I apologize to her, and I thank her for saving my son's life. Naomi froze, sponge in hand. The sincerity in his tone was unexpected. But so was the knot in her stomach. Not of satisfaction, but of wariness. This wasn't a conversation between them. This was a broadcast, calculated and polished. The feed cut to a reporter summarizing the statement, then to clips of Naomi in the water. Customers in the bistro turned to look at her, murmuring. She forced a small smile and returned to cleaning. When she finally checked her phone during break, her notifications had exploded again, this time with praise, offers for interviews, and strangers calling her a hero in all caps. Yet beneath the surface of support, she spotted other messages. Anonymous accounts accusing her of staging the rescue, calling it a PR stunt. One message chilled her more than the rest. Stay out of Langford's world, or you'll regret it. It had no profile picture, no name, just a threat. Naomi locked her phone, staring out the window at the rain beginning to fall on the Bronx streets. The river might have let her go, but the current of this story was far from done pulling at her. 3 days had passed since the press conference, and the buzz around Naomi's name hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. At the bistro, customers whispered when she refilled their water glasses. Strangers approached her on the subway to shake her hand, ask for selfies, or, in one case, slip her a folded note that simply read, "Not everyone in this city forgets a kindness." But not all attention felt safe. Twice, she'd noticed a black sedan idling across from her building when she got home late from work. When she approached, it always drove off before she could get a license plate. Jasmine urged her to report it, but Naomi brushed it off. The city was full of cars, she said. On the 4th morning, the envelope arrived. It was cream-colored, thick, and addressed in neat block letters, Ms. Naomi Carter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of Langford Capital stationery, embossed with the company's crest. The note was short. Ms. Carter, I would like to meet with you to discuss a proposal that may be of mutual benefit. Alexander Langford. Beneath was a date, time, and the address of Langford Capital's Wall Street headquarters. Naomi stared at it over her morning coffee, the steam curling upward between her and the elegant script. Mutual benefit, she muttered. That's rich, literally. She'd planned to throw it away. The last thing she wanted was to be anyone's PR pawn, especially his. But by the time her shift ended that evening, curiosity gnawed at her resolve. 2 days later, Naomi found herself standing in front of Langford Capital's glass and steel tower in the financial district. The building's mirrored facade reflected the canyon of skyscrapers surrounding it, catching slivers of late-afternoon sun. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed under recessed lighting. A receptionist in a tailored navy suit greeted her with a professional smile. Ms. Carter, Mr. Langford is expecting you. Please, this way. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that felt more like a luxury hotel than an office. Plush carpeting, abstract art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the harbor. Alexander Langford was already standing by one of those windows when she entered his office. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. "Ms. Carter," he said, turning toward her. "Mr. Langford." Her tone was polite but cool. He gestured to a chair opposite his desk. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," she replied, sitting. "I wouldn't blame you." He took his seat, studying her with an expression that was hard to read, part businesslike, part something else. "But I asked you here because I believe we have an opportunity." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "An opportunity for who? You? Your company?" "For both of us," he said without hesitation. "The footage from Hudson River Park put us in a complicated position. But it also brought attention to something I've been considering for some time, a new philanthropic initiative. A scholarship fund focused on underserved communities in New York. If you agreed to be involved, it would have credibility." "People trust you." Naomi leaned back slightly. "You want me to be the face of your project." "I want you to help shape it," Alexander corrected. "Your story, your perspective. They could make this more than just a press release." She let out a short laugh. "So the waitress from the Bronx becomes the poster child for Wall Street generosity. Do you see why I might be skeptical?" Alexander didn't flinch. "I do. Which is why I'm not asking for an answer today. But think about what you could do with the platform, the students you could help." For a moment, Naomi's thoughts drifted to Marcus, her brother's bright future cut short by a false arrest, the scholarship he'd lost, the years he could never get back. The idea of preventing that for someone else, it stirred something in her, though she refused to let it show. "I'll think about it," she said finally, standing. Alexander rose as well. "That's all I ask." Back in the lobby, Naomi passed a group of sharply dressed executives heading toward the elevators. One of them, tall, silver-haired, with an expensive watch, glanced at her, then whispered something to his colleague. They both laughed softly, not bothering to hide it. Naomi's cheeks warmed, but she kept walking. This was their world, not hers, and she wasn't sure she wanted it to be. That evening, she met Jasmine at a coffee shop in Harlem. The air smelled of cinnamon and espresso, jazz playing low over the speakers. "So let me get this straight," Jasmine said, leaning forward over her latte. "The man who accused you of trying to drown his kid now wants you to help him launch a scholarship fund." Naomi nodded. "That about sums it up." "And he's willing to put money behind it?" "From the sound of it, yes. But I don't trust his motives." Jasmine stirred her drink thoughtfully. "Motives aside, this could be big. For you, for a lot of kids." "You always talk about wanting to do more than wait tables." Naomi sighed. "I know. But if I say yes, I'm tied to him, to his company, to his image. What happens the next time he decides someone's not worth believing?" Jasmine didn't have an answer. She just reached across the table and squeezed Naomi's hand. "Whatever you decide, make sure it's on your terms." 2 nights later, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Still thinking? Some opportunities don't wait forever." She didn't reply. On Saturday, she took a walk along the Hudson again, the memory of that day replaying in her mind. The water was calmer now, the light softer, but the railing still seemed too low for comfort. She found herself picturing children leaning over it, reaching for something, losing their balance. She stopped at a bench, watching a young couple chase their toddler along the path. The child's laugh rang clear over the wind. Naomi felt the knot in her chest tighten. Maybe Alexander's motives were complicated, but maybe the outcome could still be good. When she got home, she opened her laptop and began drafting a list. Not demands exactly, but conditions. If she was going to step into this world, she wanted safeguards, full transparency, community input, measurable goals. She typed the last point, saved the document, and closed the lid. If Alexander Langford wanted her name attached to his project, he was going to have to earn it. The sound of Bronx traffic filtered faintly through Naomi's apartment window. The muffled rumble of buses, the occasional blare of a horn, the rhythmic thump-thump of someone's bass-heavy playlist drifting up from the street. It was a familiar soundtrack, one that had carried her through countless nights alone in this space. But tonight, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a reminder. Naomi sat cross-legged on the worn couch, the glow of her laptop casting shadows across her face. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she stared at the document she'd drafted. Conditions for participation in Langford. Capital Scholarship Fund. 10 bullet points, each more demanding than the last. They were reasonable. Transparency, community oversight, guaranteed funding for at least 5 years. But they were also uncompromising. She knew Alexander's board might balk at some of them. That was fine. She wasn't here to make his life easy. She closed the laptop and reached for her phone, scrolling aimlessly through her messages. That's when she saw the name she hadn't expected, Marcus Carter. It wasn't a new message, just an old one that had been pinned to the top of her inbox for years. Keep your head down, little sis. Don't give them a reason. Marcus's voice came back to her in fragments. The way he used to rap softly while doing homework. The way he could solve a math problem in his head faster than most people could punch it into a calculator. The way his laugh always made her laugh too. And then, the day, everything changed. It was a July afternoon, sweltering even in the shade. Naomi had been 15, Marcus 17. He was supposed to meet with a Columbia University recruiter the following week. His SAT scores had been perfect, his community service hours impeccable. Everyone said he was going places. But on that day, a fight broke out outside a corner store 2 blocks from their apartment. Marcus had been inside buying orange juice. Someone pointed at him as the police arrived. The real suspects had already slipped away. Naomi could still hear the click of the handcuffs, still see the confusion in his eyes as they led him to the squad car. He kept saying the same thing over and over. I didn't do anything. The charges were dropped months later for lack of evidence, but the damage was done. The recruiter stopped returning calls. The scholarship committee reevaluated his application. By the time his name was cleared, the opportunity had vanished. Marcus took a job at a warehouse in Queens and never went back to school. He'd moved out of state 5 years ago. Calls were rare now. She told herself it was because he was busy, but deep down she knew the truth. The system had broken something in him that never healed. That memory had never really gone away. But Alexander's proposal brought it roaring back. If she joined his project, could she prevent another Marcus? Or would she just be helping a billionaire look generous for the cameras? She was still mulling it over the next morning when someone knocked at her door. On the other side stood a woman with a notepad and a microphone clipped to her coat. Ms. Carter, Lauren Mitchell, New York Ledger, could I have a few minutes of your time? Naomi's first instinct was to shut the door. I'm not interested in an interview. Lauren's tone was patient but persistent. This isn't about Hudson River Park. It's about your brother, Marcus. Naomi froze. My brother has nothing to do with this. Maybe not directly, Lauren said, flipping open her notepad, but people trust you because you're real. If they knew what happened to Marcus, if they understood the cost of a broken system, it could change the entire conversation about Langford's scholarship fund. You could leverage this. Naomi shook her head sharply. Marcus's life isn't a bargaining chip, and he's not a story for you to sell. Lauren's expression softened. I'm not here to exploit him. I'm here to put the truth on record. People forget that kids in the Bronx can be brilliant and still get swallowed whole by bad luck and worse systems. Naomi's hand tightened on the doorknob. You should leave. Lauren hesitated, then slipped a business card onto the small table by the door. If you change your mind, call me. His story matters. When the door closed, Naomi leaned against it, her pulse still elevated. She didn't need journalists dredging up old wounds. Marcus deserved privacy, even if the truth might help others. Across the city, in his corner office at Langford Capital, Alexander was reading Naomi's list of conditions. Richard Cole, chairman of the board, sat across from him, the document in hand. "She's asking for a lot," Richard said, his voice tinged with disapproval. "Independent oversight? Annual public audits? You can't seriously be considering this." Alexander leaned back in his chair. "If it means she comes on board, I'll consider it." Richard smirked. "Why? She's a waitress with a viral video. This will blow over in a month." "Because," Alexander said evenly, "she's the only reason my son is alive, and people believe her in a way they don't believe us." Richard's expression cooled. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment." "Maybe," Alexander replied, "but I've learned that ignoring the right voices has its cost." That evening, Naomi's phone buzzed again. An unknown number. This time she answered. "Ms. Carter? It's Alexander Langford." Naomi's breath caught slightly. "How did you get my number?" "You'd be surprised how easy it is," he said without apology. "I received your conditions. Let's meet to discuss them." She hesitated. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." "I know, but I'd like to talk. Off the record. No cameras, just us." She considered the request, thinking of Lauren Mitchell's card still sitting by the door, of Marcus's text from years ago. "Fine, but my terms stay the same." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Alexander said. "Tomorrow, Hudson River Park, 2 o'clock. The line went dead. The next day, Naomi arrived at the park to find Alexander already there, leaning on the railing with the river at his back. The wind off the water was brisk, carrying the scent of salt and cold metal. "I thought we could meet here," he said as she approached. "Where it started." Naomi folded her arms. "Fine. Let's talk." They walked along the path, keeping a polite distance from the joggers and cyclists passing by. Alexander listened as she went through her list point by point. He didn't interrupt, though his brow furrowed at the more ambitious demands. When she finished, he said, "Some of this will be a fight with the board, but I'm willing to fight for it." "Why?" she asked bluntly. He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Because I have 2 sons who will grow up in a world where doors open for them whether they deserve it or not. I want to help open some of those doors for kids who don't have my last name. And because I owe you." Naomi searched his face for signs of performance, but what she saw was quieter than that. Not rehearsed, not for show. "Think about it," he said, and then he walked away, leaving her with the wind, the river, and the weight of her own history pressing on her. The elevator doors slid open onto the 42nd floor of Langford Capital, and Naomi Carter stepped out, clutching a slim leather folder to her chest. The scent of polished wood and expensive cologne filled the hallway. A receptionist with perfect posture and a practiced smile led her to the double-glass doors of the executive boardroom. Inside, the space was intimidating even without the people. A massive oval table of dark walnut gleamed under pendant lights. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the jagged skyline of Lower Manhattan, the Hudson glittering in the distance. The chairs were high-backed, leather, and already occupied by some of the most powerful people in the building. Alexander Langford sat near the head of the table, his expression neutral as Naomi entered. Richard Cole, the silver-haired chairman of the board, sat to his right, flipping through a binder with a frown so deep it looked carved in stone. "Ms. Carter," Alexander said, gesturing toward an empty seat across from him. "Thank you for joining us." Naomi took the chair, feeling the weight of a dozen curious stares. Every person in the room, from the CFO to the head of legal, seemed to be sizing her up, wondering why a waitress from the Bronx had been invited to their inner circle. Richard didn't bother to hide his skepticism. "Mr. Langford tells us you have thoughts on the direction of the new scholarship fund." "I do," Naomi said evenly, opening her folder. "I also have data." A few eyebrows lifted at that. She slid copies of her printed report across the table. "This is a breakdown of high school graduation rates in underserved neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, with a focus on where existing scholarship programs fail. You'll see that in some districts, fewer than 60% of students graduate on time, and the rates are worse for Black and Latino students." She stood, moving to a large wall monitor where her charts appeared in color. "But here's the part no one talks about. Scholarships often go to the students who are already outperforming their peers. That's great for them, but it leaves behind kids who could thrive if given early intervention." Richard tapped his pen impatiently. "And your point?" "My point," Naomi said, meeting his gaze, "is that if this fund is just another PR exercise for Langford Capital, it will help a handful of kids while the rest keep falling through the cracks. But if we build it right, with mentorship, tutoring, and legal support when necessary, it could change outcomes at scale." A murmur rippled through the room. One board member, a woman in her 50s named Marjorie Lee, leaned forward. "Legal support? That's outside the scope of most scholarship programs." Naomi's voice didn't waver. "It's not outside the scope of reality. I grew up in the Bronx. I've seen brilliant kids lose everything because of a single wrongful arrest, a biased teacher, or a bureaucratic delay. If you want this fund to make a difference, you need to address the barriers before they become permanent." Richard gave a short laugh, dripping with condescension. "That's a noble speech, Ms. Carter, but this is a boardroom, not a community center." Naomi took a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "With respect, Mr. Cole, maybe that's the problem. Too many decisions that affect communities are made in rooms like this without listening to the people who live there." The room went quiet. Even Alexander's head tilted slightly, as if to say careful. But Naomi didn't flinch. She clicked to the next slide, a map dotted with red and green markers. "Here are the neighborhoods where Langford Capital already has indirect influence, through property investments, retail development, and municipal contracts. These are also the neighborhoods with some of the highest dropout rates. You're already connected to these communities. This fund could be the bridge between your profit and their future." Marjorie Lee glanced at Alexander, then back at Naomi. "Do you have a proposed budget?" Naomi slid another sheet across the table. "Page 3. And before you ask, yes, it includes independent oversight and public audits. If this board is going to attach its name to a scholarship, it should be prepared to prove it's not just a tax write-off." Richard's jaw tightened. "You're asking us to expose our internal finances to public review." "I'm asking you to earn trust," Naomi countered. "Without it, all you have is a headline that lasts until the next scandal." The silence this time was heavier. Eyes shifted toward Alexander, who had been watching Naomi with an unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke. "I support her proposal." Richard's head snapped toward him. "You can't be serious." "I am," Alexander said calmly. "Naomi is right. Without transparency, this fund will be meaningless, and I didn't bring her here to nod politely and collect a check. I brought her here because she sees what we can't." A low hum of discussion broke out among the board members. Richard's glare could have cut glass, but Alexander didn't look away. "Let's put it to a vote," Marjorie suggested. Hands went up, some hesitant, some firm. When the count was over, the motion passed by a slim margin. Naomi exhaled slowly, only then realizing how tightly she'd been gripping the edge of the table. After the meeting, as the board members filed out, Richard stopped beside her. His smile was tight enough to strain the skin at his temples. "You made an impression today," he said. "Just remember, impressions fade. Influence is harder to keep." Naomi met his gaze. "Then I guess I'll just have to keep earning it." He gave a short nod and left without another word. Alexander caught up to her in the hallway. "You handled yourself well." Naomi adjusted the strap of her bag. "I wasn't there to make friends." "That's obvious," he said, almost smiling. "But you did more than hold your ground. You shifted the room. That's rare." She looked at him for a moment, searching for any trace of condescension. She found none. "I'm not here to be your PR cover, Alexander. If this turns into a photo op, I'm out." "Understood." He glanced toward the elevator. "We'll start assembling the advisory committee next week. You'll chair it." Her brows lifted. "You're serious?" "Completely." Naomi wasn't sure whether to be flattered or wary. Probably both. That night, she walked the long way home from the subway, her thoughts replaying the meeting. For the first time since the rescue, she felt like she'd actually chosen her place in this unfolding story, rather than being dragged along by it. But she also knew Richard Cole wasn't the kind of man to lose quietly. The streetlights flickered as she turned onto her block. In the reflection of a darkened shop window, she thought she saw a black sedan parked halfway down the street, the same kind she'd noticed before. When she glanced back, it was gone. By Monday morning, the victory in the boardroom felt like a lifetime ago. Naomi woke to a string of notifications, dozens of emails, texts, and social media mentions. At first, she thought it was more praise for her scholarship proposal, but when she opened the first message, her stomach tightened. It was a screenshot from a conservative blog. Waitress turned activist, Langford Capital's token pawn. The article was vicious. It mocked her background, dismissed her data as emotionally charged anecdotes, and accused her of using the Hudson River Rescue to launch a personal brand. In the comments section, anonymous users hurled insults about her race, her neighborhood, even the way she'd spoken in the board meeting. Naomi set her phone down, but it buzzed again. This time, it was Jasmine calling. "Girl, are you seeing this?" "Unfortunately," Naomi said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "They're going after you hard. And it's not just blogs. I saw a segment on one of those late-night cable panels. You know, the kind with 3 people talking over each other. They called you a publicity project for a desperate CEO." Naomi sighed. "Guess I'm officially a threat." "Promise me you won't read the comments," Jasmine said. "And you should probably watch your back." By the time she arrived at the bistro for her shift, 2 envelopes were taped to the front door, both addressed to her in block letters. Inside the first, a flyer printed with her face from the viral rescue, defaced with crude scribbles. Inside the second, a single sentence in bold type: "Stay in the Bronx where you belong." Naomi's hands shook as she shoved them into her bag. She told her manager she wasn't feeling well and left before the lunch rush began. Across the city, in Langford Capital's glass tower, Alexander Langford stood in his office watching the rain streak down the windows. Martin Hayes, his PR director, hovered nearby holding a tablet. "We have a problem," Martin said. "Several high-value clients have expressed concern about the direction of the scholarship fund. They think the transparency measures are excessive, and the backlash against Ms. Carter is fueling it." Alexander turned from the window. "What kind of concern?" "They're threatening to pull their donations if she remains the public face of the initiative." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Then we find new donors." "Alex, no." His tone cut through the room. "This fund is about credibility. If we drop her because she's inconvenient, we prove every critic right. Keep the course." Martin hesitated. then nodded. Understood. Naomi spent the afternoon at the New York Public Library, hoping the quiet might clear her mind. She found an empty table in the Rose Main reading room, surrounded by high arched windows and the faint rustle of turning pages. She had barely opened her notebook when someone slid into the chair across from her. It was Lauren Mitchell, the reporter who had shown up at her door weeks ago. "Before you tell me to leave," Lauren said, "hear me out. I know you're under attack. I also know that when people can't attack the message, they attack the messenger. If you shared Marcus's story, even just the basics, it could reframe the conversation. Make them see why this fund matters." Naomi's jaw tightened. "You think turning my brother into a headline will fix this?" "I think telling the truth is the only way to fight lies," Lauren replied softly. "Right now, they're defining you. You can take that power back." Naomi wanted to argue, but she couldn't ignore the logic. Still, the thought of Marcus reading about himself in the news, reliving that humiliation, was enough to shut the idea down. "Not like this," she said. "Not on their terms." Lauren studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then we find another way. But Naomi, be careful. This isn't just online noise. Some of these people have money, connections, and no sense of restraint." That night, Naomi returned home to find a package on her doorstep. No return address. Inside was a shattered picture frame. The glass cracked into spiderweb lines. The photo inside mangled. It was the one of her and Marcus at Coney Island, taken just weeks before his arrest. Naomi stared at it, her throat tight. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Quit before someone gets hurt." She called Jasmine immediately. "Do I call the police?" Naomi asked, pacing her apartment. "You should," Jasmine said, "but I have a feeling you know what they'll say." Naomi did. Unless there was direct evidence of a threat from a specific person, it would be not enough to act. The next morning, Alexander called. "You've been getting threats," he said, not asking. "Yes. I'll have security outside your building starting tonight." "That's not necessary." "It's not optional." His voice was firm. "You're part of this project now. I protect the people I work with." Naomi hesitated, then said quietly, "Thanks." That afternoon, she and Alexander attended a community meeting at a rec center in the Bronx to discuss the scholarship fund. Folding chairs were set in rows facing a podium. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee from a corner urn. As Naomi spoke about mentorship programs and early intervention, a man in the back stood up. "Why should we trust Langford Capital? Why should we trust you?" His voice was sharp, his eyes locked on her. "Because I grew up here," Naomi said evenly. "Because I've seen too many kids lose their future before they've had a chance to start. And because I'm willing to hold this fund accountable, even if it makes powerful people uncomfortable." There was a murmur of approval from the crowd, but the man didn't sit. "And when the money dries up? When the cameras leave, what then?" Naomi looked at him directly. "Then we fight to keep it going, together." Alexander stepped up beside her, adding, "And I'll be standing there too." The man hesitated, then nodded once and sat. Later, as they left the rec center, Alexander glanced at her. "You handled that well." "I'm used to people not believing me," she said. "I learned a long time ago that the only way to change a mind is to show up, over and over." Alexander gave a short, thoughtful nod. "Then we'll keep showing up." That night, Naomi watched from her window as a black SUV idled near the curb. This time, when she stepped outside, a tall man in a dark coat got out. "Ms. Carter," he said, extending a hand. "Name's Harris. Mr. Langford hired me. I'll be nearby until things settle down." Naomi shook his hand, part of her relieved, part of her uneasy. Because if things had escalated to the point where she needed security, she knew one thing for certain. The fight over this scholarship fund was far from over. The first crisp Saturday of December dawned clear over Manhattan, sunlight bouncing off the water like 1,000 small diamonds. Naomi Carter stood at the edge of Hudson River Park, staring at the makeshift stage that had been set up overnight. It was little more than a raised platform with a portable sound system, but the backdrop, the wide, glimmering Hudson, made it feel grander than any ballroom. She had planned this day for weeks, knowing she needed to shift the conversation from hostile headlines to the reason she'd agreed to work with Langford Capital in the first place. No boardroom, no TV studio, no curated panel, just people, in the open air, talking about opportunity. Banners for the Riverside Forum flapped gently in the breeze. Volunteers from local schools and community organizations set up folding chairs in neat rows. A table near the front offered free coffee and muffins donated by a Harlem bakery. Jasmine Lee was there, wearing a puffy coat and holding a clipboard. "You've got at least 4 reporters confirmed," she said. 2 from the local press, 1 from the Ledger, and, brace yourself, someone from the Times. Naomi exhaled. Good. If they're going to write about me, I want them to hear the whole story. By mid-morning, the crowd began to grow. Parents with strollers, teenagers in hoodies, older residents bundled in scarves. Naomi spotted Alexander Langford arriving with Elliot and Evan in tow, all 3 of them in matching navy pea coats. Alexander looked slightly out of place among the casual crowd, but the twins blended right in, darting toward the muffin table. Alexander approached. "I'm here to listen," he said quietly. "Today is yours." Naomi gave him a small nod. That's how it should be. At 11 sharp, she stepped onto the platform. The hum of conversation faded into the steady sound of the river. Naomi adjusted the microphone, the wind tugging gently at the edges of her coat. "Thank you for being here," she began, scanning the faces before her. "Some of you know me because of what happened on this river a few weeks ago. But my story didn't start there, and neither did the need for this conversation." She spoke about growing up in the Bronx, about overcrowded classrooms, underfunded programs, and watching friends fall through the cracks despite their talent. She talked about Marcus, not by name, but as a brother who was brilliant, driven, and derailed by a system that saw him as a problem before it saw him as a person. Then she shifted to the scholarship fund. "We have an opportunity to do something different," she said. "Not just to hand out money and hope for the best, but to walk with these kids every step of the way, through tutoring, mentorship, legal advocacy, and mental health support. We can build a bridge strong enough to carry them past every storm." The crowd applauded, some nodding, some wiping their eyes. When she opened the floor for others to speak, a tall man in a worn brown jacket stepped forward. "My name's Daniel Harris," he said into the microphone. 2 years ago, my daughter was ready to drop out. Her mom and I couldn't afford extra help, and she was failing her classes. Then she got a small local scholarship. Not a lot of money, but enough to pay for tutoring and bus fare. She's graduating this spring. That scholarship didn't just change her grades. It changed how she sees herself. Naomi felt the words sink into the crowd like seeds finding soil. Another parent spoke, then a teacher, then a high school senior with dreams of becoming an engineer. One by one, the stories painted a portrait of resilience, frustration, and hope. From the edge of the gathering, Lauren Mitchell took notes, her pen moving quickly. Naomi caught her eye once, and Lauren offered a small, respectful nod. No questions today, just listening. Reporters snapped photos, capturing Naomi leaning down to speak to a group of middle schoolers, or Alexander standing quietly at the back, hands in his coat pockets, watching the speakers with an expression somewhere between pride and humility. But not everyone came to support. Near the side of the stage, a small group held handmade signs. Stop the PR stunt. Bronx kids need jobs, not promises. They muttered among themselves but didn't disrupt, until Naomi invited one of them to take the mic. A woman in her 30s stepped forward, her voice sharp. I've heard a lot of talk today, but talk doesn't pay rent. How do we know this isn't just another way for a rich man to make himself look good while nothing changes for us? Naomi didn't rush to answer. She let the question hang, letting the quiet stretch just enough for the weight of it to settle. You don't know, she said finally. Not yet. Trust isn't built in a day, and I'm not asking for blind faith. What I'm asking is for you to hold me, and everyone tied to this fund, accountable. Come to the meetings. Demand to see the numbers. Speak up when we get it wrong. This doesn't work without you. The woman studied her for a moment, then gave a short nod and stepped back. By the time the forum wrapped up, the winter sun was already lowering toward the skyline, casting long shadows across the park. Naomi thanked the volunteers, shook countless hands, and listened to people's stories until her voice grew hoarse. As the crowd thinned, Alexander approached again. That was impressive, he said. You didn't shy away from the hard questions. They were the right questions, Naomi replied. If we can't answer them now, we don't deserve to run this fund. Elliot and Evan came running up, each holding a paper cup of hot cocoa. Elliot looked up at Naomi. Are you really going to help kids like Dad said? Naomi crouched to meet his eyes. That's the plan. Elliot smiled. The same quick, earnest smile she remembered from the day on the river before everything became complicated. As she gathered her notes, Lauren Mitchell approached. Naomi, today you controlled the narrative. Whatever comes next, this is the story people will remember. Naomi glanced toward the river, its surface rippling under the fading light. Then we'd better make the ending worth it. That evening, the first headlines appeared online. Bronx activist brings community together on the Hudson. Riverside Forum highlights need for holistic support in education. Langford Scholarship Initiative faces questions, wins respect. But Naomi didn't linger on the coverage. She sat at her kitchen table with a steaming bowl of soup, feeling something she hadn't felt since the day of the rescue, a quiet, grounded sense of purpose. She knew the backlash wasn't over. But now, so was the silence. The morning Naomi boarded the flight to California, New York was wrapped in a gray chill that seeped into the bones. As the plane ascended through the clouds, the skyline vanished beneath her, replaced by a sea of white. She pressed her forehead lightly against the window, wondering what Oakland and San Jose would feel like compared to the relentless pulse of New York. Alexander had insisted she make the trip. If this fund is going to mean something, he'd told her, we need to understand the challenges beyond our backyard. He'd arranged meetings with community leaders, school administrators, and youth organizations across the Bay Area. When they landed at Oakland International, the light was different, softer, with the faint scent of eucalyptus in the air. Naomi pulled her coat tighter around her, though locals walked by in light jackets, chatting about the weekend. Their first stop was a public middle school in East Oakland. The building was modest, the paint on its facade a little faded, but the courtyard buzzed with life. Kids chasing each other, others hunched over books under a patch of shade. Principal Elena Ruiz greeted them warmly. We don't get many visitors from Wall Street, she said with a smile that didn't hide her curiosity about why they were there. Naomi quickly explained the scholarship initiative, emphasizing the importance of mentorship and resources, not just financial aid. Ruiz listened closely, then gestured toward the hallway. Let me show you why that matters. They walked past lockers covered in motivational posters. We lose some of our brightest kids by 9th grade, Ruiz said quietly. Not because they aren't capable, but because they don't see the point of trying when their path feels blocked before it begins. In one classroom, a boy named Jalen was hunched over a disassembled laptop. When Naomi asked what he was working on, he lit up. "It's the motherboard. I think I can fix it." He spoke with the kind of focus she'd seen in Marcus when he was younger. On the way out, Ruiz said, "If he had access to the right program, Jalen could be designing hardware by college. Without it, he might never finish high school." Naomi made a note in her folder. Tech programs, early access. From Oakland, they drove south to San Jose to meet with a nonprofit that provided after-school robotics classes in underserved neighborhoods. In a converted warehouse, Naomi watched a group of middle schoolers program small robots to navigate obstacle courses made of cardboard and tape. A girl with purple braids named Camila approached, holding up a tablet. "Look, I got it to turn," she said proudly. Naomi knelt beside her. "That's amazing. How long have you been doing this?" 3 months, Camila said. "Before that, I didn't even know what coding was." Naomi's chest tightened. In New York, she'd met kids with the same spark, the same untapped potential. Geography shouldn't decide whether a child got the chance to discover what they could do. That night, they met with Ethan Walker, the Silicon Valley tech billionaire who had pledged a significant donation to the scholarship fund. His home in Palo Alto was all glass walls and warm wood, perched on a hill with a sweeping view of the bay. Ethan greeted them barefoot, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater. "Alexander tells me you're the heart of this project," he said to Naomi as they sat in a sunlit living room. "I don't know about that," she replied, "but I believe in it. And I believe it can't just be about writing checks." Ethan nodded. "Agreed. When I was a kid, my family couldn't afford a computer. I taught myself programming on a library terminal. That one access point changed my life. I want this fund to be 1,000 access points." They talked for hours about internships, summer programs, connecting students with mentors in tech fields. Ethan promised not just money, but direct involvement from his network. As they left, Alexander said quietly, "That went well." Naomi smiled faintly. "If everyone in your world thought like him, maybe we wouldn't need this fund in the first place." On their last day, Naomi visited a community center in West Oakland. A mural on the wall depicted a bridge stretching across a bright blue sky, filled with children holding books, tools, and musical instruments. Inside, she met with volunteers who ran tutoring sessions in math and reading. One of them, a retired teacher named Mrs. Alvarez, said, "These kids are brilliant. They just need someone to believe in them long enough for them to start believing in themselves." Naomi stayed for an hour, helping a boy named Mateo work through a set of algebra problems. When he finally solved the last one, his grin was so wide it felt like sunlight breaking through a cloud. That evening, Naomi stood on the balcony of her hotel, looking out at the Bay Bridge lit up against the night. Alexander joined her, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You've been quiet today," he said. "Just thinking," she replied, "about how big this could be, and how easy it would be to get it wrong." "We'll get it right," Alexander said with certainty. Naomi looked at him. "You sound sure." "I am," he said simply, "because you're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Let's hope that's enough." On the flight back to New York, Naomi reviewed her notes. Early intervention programs in tech and science. Mentorship networks across states, direct partnerships with community centers, accountability measures that worked on a local level. The trip had opened her eyes. This wasn't just about the Bronx, or even New York. It was about kids everywhere who had the talent but not the ladder to climb. And now she knew. The fund couldn't just be a local bridge. It had to be a national one. Snow had fallen in New York the night before, leaving a thin, glittering layer over the steps of the New York Public Library. Under the soft glow of the library's grand facade, the marble lions, patience and fortitude, looked as if they'd been dusted with powdered sugar. Inside, the marble foyer shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Rows of gold-trimmed chairs filled the main hall, facing a small stage set before the towering arched windows. Waiters in black ties carried trays of champagne flutes, their footsteps quiet against the polished stone. Naomi Carter stood in the green room just off the main hall, smoothing the front of her deep blue dress. Jasmine, wearing a sleek black gown, fussed with the clasp of Naomi's necklace. "You look like you belong here," Jasmine said with a grin. Naomi laughed softly. "I'm not sure I ever will, but tonight isn't about me. It's about the kids." Alexander Langford entered then, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who had hosted hundreds of events like this, but his eyes softened when they met Naomi's. "Everything's ready," he said. "We have donors from across the country, representatives from every borough, and the boys." Elliot and Evan peeked in from the doorway, both wearing miniature tuxedos, their hair neatly combed. "Hi, Naomi," they chimed in unison. She smiled warmly. "You two clean up pretty well?" The program began with a string quartet playing softly as guests took their seats. Alexander opened the evening with a welcome speech, thanking attendees and outlining the vision for the scholarship fund. He spoke of breaking barriers, creating access, and ensuring that talent, no matter where it was born, could find its way to opportunity. Then he gestured toward the wings. But this fund wouldn't exist without the courage and conviction of one woman. "Please welcome Naomi Carter." Applause filled the hall as Naomi stepped onto the stage. For a moment, the light was blinding. She took a breath, scanning the audience, faces she recognized from boardrooms and news headlines, but also parents and teachers she'd met during community visits. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady. "When I was a little girl in the Bronx, I thought opportunity was something that lived somewhere else. It lived in better neighborhoods, in bigger schools, in families with connections, and I thought maybe, if I worked hard enough, I could catch a glimpse of it." She paused, letting the words settle. "But I've learned something since then. Opportunity isn't a place you visit. It's something you build, together, so that no one has to go chasing it. That's what this fund is about. Not just scholarships, but mentorship, advocacy, and the belief that every child is worth investing in." The applause rose again, but she lifted a hand gently. "And I want you to hear from the people who know what it means to be given a chance." From the side of the stage, Elliot and Evan walked out. They carried no notes, just the confidence of boys who had a story to tell. Elliot stepped up to the microphone first. "A few weeks ago, I fell into the river." A ripple of laughter moved through the room, but his tone stayed serious. "I was scared. I thought I wasn't going to make it. But then Naomi jumped in and saved me." Evan stepped forward. "And people said she was bad. They said she hurt my brother. But that wasn't true. She helped us, and now she's helping other kids too. We think that's really cool." The audience melted. Cameras flashed, and even some of the most stoic donors smiled openly. Naomi crouched beside the boys, giving each a quick hug before guiding them back toward Alexander. Next came a short video montage, clips from the Riverside Forum, footage of Naomi visiting schools in Oakland and San Jose, interviews with students who would be among the first scholarship recipients. The final shot lingered on a mural of a bridge, painted across a school wall, the words "Opportunity lives here" stenciled underneath. When the lights came back up, the applause was immediate and sustained. Dinner followed: roasted salmon, seasonal vegetables, and small flourless chocolate cakes dusted with powdered sugar. Naomi made her way from table to table, speaking with guests, answering questions, listening to ideas. At one table, she met Daniel Harris, the father who had spoken at the Riverside Forum. He'd traveled with his daughter, who now wore a silver bracelet engraved with her upcoming graduation date. "I just wanted to thank you," Daniel said, his voice low but full. "You reminded her she could make it." Naomi squeezed his hand. "She did that herself." "I just reminded her she wasn't alone." Toward the end of the night, Alexander took the stage again. "Tonight we've raised just over $12 million, he announced. Gasps and applause filled the hall. That means more than 400 students will receive full scholarships and support services in the coming year. He glanced toward Naomi, and for a brief moment, his formal demeanor softened into something personal. This is only the beginning. As the guests began to leave, Naomi stepped outside onto the library's front steps. The city lights stretched endlessly, their glow reflected in the damp sheen of the pavement. She felt the chill in the air, but also a warmth rising in her chest, a mix of relief, gratitude, and resolve. Jasmine appeared beside her. "You realize you just pulled off something huge, right?" Naomi smiled faintly. "It's not about pulling it off. It's about what comes next." From the bottom of the steps, Elliot and Evan waved up at her before climbing into the waiting SUV with Alexander. As they drove away, Naomi thought of all the kids she'd met: Jalen, Camila, Mateo, and the thousands she hadn't yet met but now had a chance. That night, as she hung up her dress and set her heels by the door, her phone buzzed with a new message. No threats this time. Just 3 words from an unknown number. "Keep building, Naomi." She didn't know who sent it, but she smiled, because she planned to. Winter loosened its grip on New York slowly that year. By late March, the air along the Hudson carried the faintest hint of warmth, and the trees lining the park's walkways were tipped with the earliest signs of green. Naomi Carter stood by the river's edge, watching the sunlight skip across the water. The last time she had stood here with Alexander Langford, the air had been colder, the ground bare. Then, this railing had been a symbol of danger. Too low, too easy for a child to slip past. Now, a new structure stretched the length of the pier, sturdy, waist-high with smooth metal bars and safety glass panels etched with playful designs of fish, boats, and waves. The installation had been funded entirely by the Scholarship Initiative, and a small plaque at one end read, "In honor of the courage to leap in and the hands that pull us back." Behind Naomi, the park bustled with life. Families picnicked on the grass. Cyclists sped by. Somewhere, a street musician strummed a guitar, the notes drifting lazily through the breeze. Alexander approached, his coat open, the wind lifting the edges. Elliot and Evan ran ahead of him, their laughter bright against the river's low murmur. "They've been waiting all morning to see you," Alexander said, his tone lighter than she'd ever heard it. Elliot skidded to a stop in front of her. "Look, Dad let us bring the kites." He held up a brightly colored diamond-shaped kite with a long ribbon tail. Naomi grinned. "Perfect day for it." The boys dashed toward an open patch of grass, leaving Naomi and Alexander by the new railing. "They'll remember this," Alexander said quietly. "Not the gala, not the speeches. This." Naomi looked at him, seeing for the first time how much softer his edges had become since that day on the pier. That's the point, isn't it? To leave them with something that lasts. They walked slowly toward the center of the pier, where a small group had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Local officials were there, along with parents, students, and community leaders. Jasmine stood near the front, holding a camera, her smile wide as she caught Naomi's eye. Ethan Walker had flown in from California for the occasion, his casual sweater and jeans a stark contrast to the suits around him. He gave Naomi a quick hug. "Glad I could see this in person," he said. "It's good work, Naomi. Keep it up." When the speeches began, Alexander stepped forward first. "This railing isn't just about safety," he said into the microphone. "It's about how we choose to protect what matters. Sometimes that means metal and glass. Sometimes it means opportunity and hope. Either way, it's about making sure the next generation has solid ground under their feet." Then he handed the mic to Naomi. She hesitated for just a second, looking out at the faces before her. People from the Bronx, from boardrooms, from Oakland and San Jose, even some she'd met only once, but who had come because they believed in what this stood for. "When I jumped into the Hudson that day," she began, "I wasn't thinking about anything but getting a little boy back to safety. I wasn't thinking about headlines or funds or ceremonies like this. But afterward, I realized something. Saving one person is powerful, but it's even more powerful to make it so they never need saving in the first place." She gestured toward the railing. "This is one way. The scholarship fund is another. And the truth is, none of it works unless we keep showing up for each other, over and over, in the small ways and the big ones." There was a moment of stillness, and then the applause rose, warm and sustained. Naomi took the oversized scissors from a city official, cut the ribbon cleanly, and stepped back as the crowd moved forward to see the new railing up close. The boys tugged at her hands, eager to get back to their kites. On the grass, Elliot's kite caught the wind almost immediately, soaring high, its ribbon tail fluttering in the sunlight. Evans took a little more coaxing, but soon both were dancing in the sky, bright streaks against the pale blue. Naomi laughed, the sound surprising even herself. It wasn't the guarded laugh she'd used for months. It was easy, unburdened. Alexander watched from a few feet away, his gaze not on the kites, but on her. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod. Not one of agreement or business, but of quiet gratitude. As the afternoon wore on, people began to drift away, leaving the park to the regular rhythm of joggers and families. Naomi lingered at the edge of the pier, her hands resting on the smooth curve of the new railing. Alexander joined her, the boys still running in the background. "You could have walked away from all of this," he said. "After the accusations, the threats, no one would have blamed you." Naomi shook her head. "Maybe. But then I'd still be wondering what could have happened if I stayed. And I've spent enough of my life wondering, what if?" He studied her for a moment. "You've changed the way I see a lot of things, Naomi." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you've changed more than you think, too." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water. The sunlight was lower now, turning the river to molten gold, just like the day they first met. Only this time, the air between them was different. Not sharp with accusation, but steady with mutual respect. From the grass, Elliot's voice rang out. "Naomi, look how high it is!" She turned to see his kite at its peak, the ribbon tail snapping in the wind, and she felt something settle in her. The sense that the chaos of the past months had led to something solid, something worth keeping. Later, as she walked home along the river, Naomi passed the plaque again. Her eyes lingered on the words, the courage to leap in and the hands that pull us back. For a long time, she had been the one leaping, into icy water, into fights she didn't choose, into rooms where she didn't feel welcome. But now, she realized, she wasn't leaping alone. There were hands ready to catch her too. And maybe that was what building a bridge of light really meant, not just crossing it, but holding it steady so others could follow. Thank you for walking alongside Naomi, Alexander, and the children, from that fateful moment by the Hudson River to the day the Bridge of Light was built. This isn't just a story about a rescue. It's a journey of courage, trust, and the power we hold when we stand up for one another. If this story touched your heart, Hit subscribe so we can keep sharing more inspiring journeys together.